Please be advised that there is material that will be presented that is not AA Conference approved material. We believe that Joe and Charlie clearly state when they present material that is not AA Conference approved.
We come here restless, irritable, discontented, filled with shame, fear, guilt, and remorse, anger, impatience, intolerance, selfish, self-centered human beings. Now, if we've changed from that state of mind to the state of mind that gives us, that we're given in the promises, then surely we've undergone a great change in our personality. A personality change sufficient to recover from alcoholism. If we receive these promises at the end of 9 steps, we have had a spiritual awakening or a spiritual experience. We are completely different people. Now, if that's true, then what's the purpose of the last 3 steps? And many people will tell us the last 3 steps aren't maintenance steps. Now, I'll agree that they will help us stay sober. But the word maintenance itself is a misnomer. To maintain something means to keep it as is. And another law in our universe says nothing in our universe ever stays as is. Everything in our universe is in a constant state of change. It's either growing or it's dying, it's progressing or it's regressing. My God, I've made a tremendous amount of spiritual growth through the first 9 steps. But I can't maintain there. Because if I try to maintain there, I start slipping back. The only way you can coast, is downhill. You can't coast uphill. You got to coast downhill. And if I start coasting, I start slipping back. The next thing you know, I've got problems with people. Next thing you know, that backs up and I've got problems in my mind. The next thing you know, I'm blocked off from God. And the next thing you know, I'm drunk all over again. Twice in the big book, Bill talks about a 4th dimension of existence that they never dreamed of. Far, far beyond the normal 3 dimensions. We believe that the purpose of the last 3 steps, we believe they are growth steps that move us into a new dimension of living, far beyond the normal 3 dimensions of living. Let's take just a few minutes now to look at them. Let's see if we can't see the growth factor rather than the maintenance factor in these last 3 steps. Joe?
One of the things we did in the fellowship was we took all the steps out of the book and put them on these cards, put them on the wall. New people come in today like I did, didn't read the book, so I look at the steps on the wall and begin to work the steps off the wall with no instructions. No wonder I got messed up. But if you look at the steps in this little card, it says continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, properly admitted it. If you did that, you'd be doing the intent of step 10. Somehow or another, we got the idea that we do that at night while in bed. Charlie and I have discussed this, and I have to admit that I don't get in trouble much at night in bed much anymore.
He used to say we didn't, and I told him to speak for himself.
I don't. Well, the nighttime portion of this step 10's over in step 11 anyhow. It's not in step 10. So let's look at step 10 and see what the intention of step 10, it's a growth step. Now this thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take a personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We have entered the world of the Spirit.
We've had a spiritual experience or a spiritual awakening. We've entered the world of the Spirit.
Our next function is to grow.
To grow, not maintain, not stay where you are, but to grow.
In understanding and effectiveness. Now this is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. Continue to watch for selfish dishonesty, resentment, and fear.
What step did we use to look at those in the first place? Anybody remember? Step 4, okay.
When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them.
What steps did we use there? 6 and 7, didn't we? Okay.
We discuss them with someone immediately
And what step was that? 5, okay.
and make amends quickly if we've harmed
And
anyone.
what steps did we use there? 8 and 9.
Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code.
Now, all of our spiritual growth came through steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. We didn't get any growth out of step 1. We didn't get any growth out of step 2. Step 3 was but just a decision. All of our growth came from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. I would defy anybody in this room to work step 10 the way the book says to work it and stay the way you are. You absolutely cannot do that. As you continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear, you learn more and more and more about yourself. As you ask God to remove those things, they become less and less. As you discuss them with another human being, you learn more about yourself. As you make amends quickly when you've harmed someone, your relationship with the world and the people in it become better and better and better and better. I've got that little inventory sheet up in my head. I can see it just plain as day, and you guys can too. Used to, if I got screwed up at 10 o'clock in the morning, if I didn't do anything about it, I'd cussed a couple people out by 11 o'clock. 2 or 3 had cussed me out by 12. By nighttime, I'm an absolute basket case. What I have finally learned to do is if I get screwed up about 10 o'clock in the morning, is stop. Get off in the corner by myself. And I say, okay, Charlie, who are you mad at? What did they do to you? What part of self is affected? What did you do, if anything, to set it in motion? Which character defect has come back to the surface? And invariably, the old selfish or dishonest or self-seeking, frightened, or inconsiderate character has popped back in there. I can spot it immediately. Then I can say, God, you know I don't want to be this way. Please take this away from me, the selfishness or the dishonesty or the whatever it is. Discuss it with someone as soon as I can, preferably my sponsor. I can't always do that. And if I've hurt anybody, I make amends quickly. In 15, 20, 30 minutes, that whole thing's gone. And the rest of the day is okay. I don't want to spend any more time in anger and fear and resentment and etc. I love to feel good. And I'm going to keep feeling good just as much as I possibly can because I've got the tools to do it with. Step 10 is a very, very definite growth step. You just can't do it the way the book says without learning more about yourself. You can't do it the way the book says without the character defects becoming less and less. You can't do it the way the book says without your relationship with the world and the people in it becoming better and better and better. And we begin to move into a new dimension of living. I never dreamed that you could live a life where you're not worried all the time. I never dreamed you could live a life to where you were not scared to death of people, places, and things. I never knew that you could live and be happy 24 hours a day. Hell, how could I know that? I'd never been that way before. This thing absolutely, completely works if we'll keep working at it. We'll grow and we'll grow and we'll grow and we'll grow and we'll grow every day for the rest of our life. But be careful. Because once again, if you buy into this idea, then that means you really are responsible for what you are. I can't blame it on anybody else. If I get screwed up today and stay screwed up, it's got to be my fault. Because I know I don't have to be that way if I don't want to be that way. But unfortunately, as a human being, there are times I like to be screwed up too. Once in a great while, I love to get mad. Because I can romp and stomp and raise hell with everybody around me. And it gives me a comfortable feeling of superiority over other people. Once in a while I like to be afraid because I can use that to rationalize and justify not doing something I ought to go do. Or just as importantly, doing something I shouldn't be doing in the first place. But when I do that any longer, I don't enjoy it like I used to. Somewhere I catch myself right in the middle of it. I say, okay, idiot, you're doing it to yourself. Do step 10 and get rid of this crap. And when I do it, it just disappears automatically. It really does work. Now, he says, and we have ceased fighting, another set of promises. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time sanity will have returned. The obsession of the mind is gone. And now that sanity's returned, we will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as if from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally. And we will find that this has happened automatically.
You get your sanity back on page 84, by the way. Remember it said that step 1, that we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, our lives had become unmanageable. Step 2 said we came to believe that the power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. By this time, sanity will have returned. We get our sanity back on page 84. We'll be seldom be interested in liquor. We recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally. We'll find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That's the miracle of it. We're not fighting it, neither we're avoiding temptation. I used to have an obsession to drink. When the times that I would promise myself I wouldn't drink, I'd be thumbing through a magazine, and I'd see a bottle of whiskey in there. Have that little ice stuff running down the edges. My mouth would water. Charlie said I used to slobber a lot, but just looking at a picture of alcohol, my mouth would water. I had a terrible situation and obsession to drink. But I looked up one day. Remember it said back on page 45, the main object of this book was to enable me to find a power greater than myself which would solve my problem. And one day I looked up after working these steps and I said, what happened to that obsession to drink? It's just gone. Never to have seriously returned in all these almost 30 years now. Thank God. I'm not one of those who could fight not drinking one day at a time. The obsession had to be removed from me because I'm just not that strong. And it was removed, thank God. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We've not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We're neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. That is how we react as long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. Now, it's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. Remember Jim, the automobile man? He did 1, 2, and 3. And good things started to happen for Jim. But he got drunk a half a dozen times in rapid succession because he didn't follow the rest of the steps of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Things were good for him, and he rested on his laurels and accepted the good things. And by the time we get around to this, alcohol is a subtle foe. By the time we get around to step 10, we may be back in the house, which would be good. And if we're back in the house, we might even be lucky enough to be back in the bedroom. The dog might have been quitting biting us by this time. We're probably back to work and making a little money. We're probably back to work and making a little money in debt, $50,000.
Bought a new Buick.
Bought a new Buick, yeah, I did that recently. And things are good, is what I'm trying to say. And if you're not careful, things will compete for your sobriety, and things will get your sobriety if you're not careful. It's easy to let up on a spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We're headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We're not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will in all of our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It's the proper use of the will. And all weekend up to this moment, we've said that willpower was no good. But God never gave us anything that was bad. He gave us our willpower for a purpose. And there's the purpose for our willpower. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It's the proper use of the will. Thy will, not mine be done, is the proper use of the will.
But you'll notice the perfect sequence of the big book. He gives us our willpower back on page 85, but we got restored to sanity back on page 84. It'd be hell to get our will before we got restored to sanity, wouldn't it?
Listen to the explanation of this next paragraph very carefully.
Okay, now we're going to very briefly do 11 and 12 and then kind of finish this thing up. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction, not suggestion, from Him who has all knowledge and power. If we've carefully followed directions, not suggestions, we've begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we've become God conscious. We've begun to develop this vital sixth sense, but we must go further, and that means more action. And here we're referring to a vital sixth sense as being God consciousness. You know, everything I know on a conscious level, I've learned through 5 senses of direction. I can see, and I can smell, and I can taste, and I can hear, and I can touch. And everything I've ever learned on a conscious level, I've learned through one of those 5 senses. Now you can take everything I know, and everything Joe knows, and everything you guys know, and everything that the entire human race knows, and add it all together, and it's just a tiny, tiny, tiny speck of information related to the knowledge of the universe. Now, if God has all knowledge and all power, and I believe He does, my book says so. If God dwells within me, and I believe He does, my book says so, then that means I have within myself all the knowledge and all the power that I'll ever need to handle any conceivable situation which can come up in the future, providing I know how to tap into that knowledge and that power. A sixth sense of direction. Now, there's nothing new about this at all. It's long been known that the way you tap into that sixth sense of direction, that God inside, that knowledge and that power, is through prayer and meditation. And most of us, when we come to AA, we're completely bankrupt in those areas. I knew very little about prayer, even being raised in church. Only had 2 prayers. One went like this: now lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul. I don't like that prayer anymore. Dealing with death, and I'm not into that. The other prayer I used, and I'm sure you used it also, went like this: God, if you'll get me out of this damn mess, I swear I'll never do this again. I knew nothing about meditation. Oh, I had read where meditation might be chanting certain words, might be lying down and listening to soft music, might be clearing your mind of all thought. I don't know about you guys, but I know about me. I've never been able to clear my mind of all thought. I get up in the morning, that sucker turns on, and it runs all day long. I've never been able to stop it. And it would seem to be impossible for people like me to develop a life of prayer and meditation. Thank God Bill Wilson was a real alcoholic. Thank God Bill Wilson didn't know anything about prayer and meditation either. He didn't know enough about it to tell us about prayer and meditation. Thank God he didn't. You know, most people that are knowledgeable in the area of prayer and meditation, when they write on it, they write so far over my head that I can't understand what they're saying. Bill couldn't do that. But what he could do is give us some definite and valuable suggestions that if we would follow them, we would develop our own life of prayer and meditation. It may not be like anybody else's, but it will be our own life of prayer and meditation. He tells us what to do when we go to bed at night. He tells us what to do when we get up in the morning. He tells us what to do when we face indecision. He tells us what we do when we go through the day if we're agitated or doubtful. He covers practically every aspect of our life on a 24-hour-a-day period through these simple little suggestions. Let's look at them for just a moment. Page 86.
You know, communication is the beginning of all understanding. Give you, for instance, when we started here Friday night, a lot of you didn't know us and we didn't know you, but we've been talking and listening to each other all weekend here and there. We know each other better today, don't we? Through talking and listening. Wouldn't that work with God? Talking and listening, prayer and meditation, we would know each other better, you see.
On page 86 in the first paragraph, he's going to tell us what we do when we go to bed at night. Here's the nighttime thing. It's in step 11. It's not in step 10. It's in 11. And if you look at this carefully, I think you'll see a repetition of steps 4 through 9 as we do this little inventory when we go to bed, Joe.
So when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid?
There's step 4 again.
Do we owe an apology?
There's step 8 and 9 again.
Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once?
There's step 5 again.
Were we kind and loving toward all? What could we have done better? That's columns 4 and 5. Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time? Were we thinking what we could do for others? Or what we could pack into the stream of life? But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken.
And there's 6 and 7 again.
Yeah.
So really, if we do that little inventory the way the book suggests, we're working 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 again. 10 does it during the daytime. 11 does it at night. Now, we made up a little inventory sheet that kind of illustrates what this thing's talking about. You may want to use it, you may not. It really doesn't make much difference what we use, as long as we use something. But on this inventory sheet we made up, on one side of that thing, you find the personality characteristics of a self-willed human being. On the other side, you find the personality characteristics of God's will. And we took all the character defects in the big book: selfish, self-seeking, dishonesty, frightened, and inconsiderate. Then we went to the 12 and 12 and got all the character defects we could find there. And they all are offshoots of the top 4 anyhow. And we put them on the left-hand side of the sheet. The right-hand side, we tried to find the opposite of that and put it on the right-hand side of the sheet. And all we're trying to do is get from the left-hand side of the sheet to the right-hand side of the sheet. It takes about 5 minutes at night to run down through this thing, making check marks, and see where I've been that day. And never are the check marks in the same places. They're always continually changing. Never have they all been on one side completely. But I tell you what is happening. Over a period of time, I find myself checking more on the right-hand side than I do on the left-hand side. The personality change continues through this inventory process. There was an old philosopher named Sandburg, Carl Sandburg. And Carl said, when a society fails, there's always one thing present, and that is that they have forgotten where they came from. And when they forgot where they came from, then they lost sight of where they were going, and then they got lost out there somewhere. In order for you and I to fail, we have to forget where we came from. And as long as we're using this inventory, we can't forget. It shows us what we are and what we need to continue working on. And I found one thing in my time of sobriety. I am going to inventory. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I got one or two choices. I can wait until I'm so sick that I'm almost drunk, and then start trying to dig myself out from under that mess. Or I can do it on a daily basis and keep myself on a reasonably even keel. And I've found that it takes less time and less energy to do it on a daily basis than it does to wait till I'm almost drunk. And with much less chance of ending up getting drunk over it too. But one way or other, I'm going to inventory. I just don't have any choice in the matter. And I think we're all exactly the same way. That's what we do at night. On awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance, for after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. You know, most of us, the first thing we do when we wake up is we jump out of bed and we go to the bathroom. I had a guy tell me the first thing he did was get on his treadmill. I said, you got a damn sight better bladder than I've got. I go to the bathroom first. We run in the bathroom and relieve the body. And then we run back in the kitchen and we have a little coffee and maybe a little breakfast. We feed the body. And we get through feeding the body, we run back to the bathroom again, and you ladies begin to fix your faces. And we men begin to fix our hair and whatever we got to do. And we get that all fixed up, then we go to the closet, and we select the clothes with which we're going to cover the body that day. It takes a long time to select the proper clothes. They got to be the right size, the right color, the right match. Spend lots of time on it. We get the body all covered up, then we get ready to leave the house. And as we leave the house, we usually feed the cat or the dog, whichever we might have, or both. And as we go out the door, we be sure we lock the door. We don't want anybody stealing our junk while we're gone. And we run out to the car, and we walk around the car, and we see if there's air in the tires. We get in the car, and we turn the switch on and see how much fuel's in it. And then we start it up and we take off down the road. We did all those things to take care of the body, to take care of the cat and dog, to take care of the junk, to take care of the car. But what did we do about our minds that morning? Our mind's going to run the whole show all day long. Did we take time to feed the mind? Did we take time to check the air and the tire in the mind, the gas level in the mind? You know, if you and I would spend 1/10 of the time on our minds that we spend on our body and our junk, hell, there's no limit to what we could be. A very definite and valuable suggestion. I always like to look at words because they mean so much to us. He says, on awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. He doesn't say after we've gone to the bathroom, after we've had a cup of coffee, after we've dressed ourselves. He says on awakening. And I think it means right then, while we're still in bed, before we ever get out of the bed, we think about these things he's talking about. In thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God for inspiration, intuitive thought, or a decision. We relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. We're often surprised how the right answers come after we've tried this a while. Used to, when I faced indecision, I would run it into my mind, and my little computer up here would say, we don't have the answer for that. And it'd come back out the other side of my head. And I would grab it and I would stick it back in there again. And that little computer and that bad software would say, told you we don't have the answer. And it'll kick it out and I'll stick it back in again. And after a while, the mind goes tilt. Complete frustration. He said, let's don't do this anymore. He said, if we face indecision, let's don't argue with it. Let's don't fight with it. Let's stop. Let's ask God for the right thought or for the right decision. Then he says, relax and take it easy. And I don't think he means lay down and go to sleep. I think he means get your mind off of that subject so God can enter in and give you an answer. As long as I'm struggling with it, God can't answer. So how do I relax and take it easy and get my mind off of that subject? I go do something else. I go out there and start mowing the grass, painting the house, washing the dishes, doing something. And it's amazing how often my mind goes back to that idea and there's information there I didn't have before. It may be just as simple as, well, Charlie, why don't you call Joe and see what Joe thinks? And I didn't think about that before. And I called Joe and I asked him, and by golly, he's got the answer just like that. And I used to say, my, wasn't it lucky I called Joe? No, an intuitive thought, an intuitive action from that sixth sense of direction. I have finally learned. Now really this has taken me years. I have finally learned to listen to other people. Used to, when you were talking, I couldn't hear what you were saying because I'm thinking about what I'm going to say just as soon as you shut up. And I couldn't hear what you were saying. But today I've learned to listen to people because they may have the answer to what I was struggling with yesterday. And yesterday I couldn't make a decision and I asked God for the right thought or answer. And you and I might be standing in the supermarket checkout line. And you might be talking to the person in front of you. And you might voice the words which are the answer to what I was fighting with yesterday. This thing absolutely, completely amazes me. It really does. God has never spoken to me direct. You know, there's some people he does, but he doesn't do that for me. But I think God speaks to me through other people. And I think he answers my questions and my problems through other people. And if I listen to other people, I get the answers. Now that is meditation. That's meditation for busy people. We alcoholics are busy people. We don't have time to lay down and listen to soft music. We don't have time to sit around chanting certain words. But we've got time to ask God for the right thought or decision, relax and take it easy, and wait for the answer to come to us. It's a form of meditation for busy people. Now he tells us how to pray.
He said, what used to be the hunch or occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. So you will teach, if we're doing these things, you'll teach yourself about prayer and meditation. You'll just know. Being still inexperienced and having just made conscious contact with God is not probable that we're going to be inspired at all times. We might pay for this presumption in all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. Nevertheless, we find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration. We come to rely upon it. I was listening to the radio, and I remember when I was young in my sobriety, and I heard that song called In the Garden. Y'all know I've heard it all my life, really. Never did understand what it meant. But that particular day, I began to think about it and what that song meant. And it's a song about prayer and meditation. And, of course, I didn't know that. But I began to rely upon this inspiration. We usually conclude such a period of meditation with a prayer, that we be shown all through the day what our next step is to be, that we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. We ask especially for freedom from self-will, and are careful to make no request for ourselves only. We may ask for ourselves, however, if others will be helped. We are careful never to pray for our own selfish ends. Many of us have wasted a lot of time doing that. It doesn't work. You can easily see why. As I said, I used to pray, God, give me this, and God, give me that. God, help me make more money. Help me get my wife back. Give me a bigger house. Give me a better job. Use God like an errand boy. Oh, by the way, if I forgot to ask you something, well, give me that also. very, very selfish prayers. You can see why those kind of prayers don't work. I pray only for the knowledge of His will for me and the power to carry that out. And that's pretty hard for me to do. Not anymore, because I have seen the results of those prayers. My life has worked out a whole lot better than anything that I could have asked for through prayer and meditation.
They came to me and they said, pray only for knowledge of His will and the power to carry that out. And I said, well, how in the hell is He going to know what I want? And they said, He don't give a damn what you want. They said He's interested in what you need. And they said that He knows more about what you need than you do. They said, Charlie, you've been trying to get what you want and what you need all your life. And you've damn near destroyed you and everybody around you. Said God can't possibly do a worse job of it than you've done yourself. All you need is knowledge of His will for you and the power to carry that out. And it absolutely works. It's amazing. It's amazing how many things that we've been given that we didn't ask for in the first place. Didn't know we were going to receive them. And all of a sudden we got them. And I think it simply comes from trying to do God's will and do the things that He wants us to do.
How could you get to where we came from, to Red Deer, Alberta, other than by God's grace? It couldn't happen. You can't make it happen. But here we are. He said, if our circumstance warrant, we ask our wives or friends to join us in morning meditation. Well, us guys are not too good for asking our wives to do these kind of things. But one morning, many years ago, Phyllis said to me, honey, you know how they are. I said, I wonder what this is going to cost. She said, oh, no, you old silly thing. So what I want you to do is to read this to me and explain it to me. I said, well, I can do that. So I read that to her and explained it to her, a lot more than she wanted to know. And the next morning she said, well, read this to me and explain it to me. And we read that and I explained it to her and she talked to me a little bit about it, and that kind of began a thing with us. Kind of reading and talking to each other, a little prayer and meditation going on in our life. I've heard it all my life, those people that pray together stay together. And Phyllis and I have been married this time for 26 years without a divorce. Thank God. See? But you gals will have to help us old hard-headed men with this thing, because we don't think about stuff like that. So,
you give us a chance to explain your devotional to you. We'll do that. We'll explain it to you real good.
Prick us a little bit.
Page 87, bottom of the page. As we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves that we are no longer running the show. Humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will be done. Now here's the positive results of step 11. We are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. We do not tire so easily, for we're not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. And here's the shortest, complete paragraph in the big book. It works. It really does. It's a paragraph within itself. We alcoholics are undisciplined. So we let God discipline us in the simple way we've just outlined. But this is all. There is action, more action. Faith without works is dead. The next chapter is entirely devoted to step 12. Now, we're not even going to attempt to go through chapter 7, working with others. But we'll talk about step 12 for just a little bit. Step 12 is a very definite, again, 3-part step, multiple part step. And I think the first part of step 12 is the greatest promise to be found anywhere in the big book Alcoholics Anonymous. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. Not a result, not one result, not some result, the result of these steps. I think that promises to me is that if I will apply the first 11 steps in my life to the best of my ability, I am guaranteed that I'm going to have a spiritual awakening as the result. Bill tells us in the 12 and 12, there's as many kinds of spiritual awakenings as there are people in AA, but they've all got certain things in common, and that is that we're able to feel, believe, and do things that we could never do before on our own strength unaided. Now, if that's one of the definitions of a spiritual awakening, then I believe I've had one. I feel things I've never felt before. I feel love, patience, tolerance, compassion, and goodwill toward my fellow man. Before AA, I could have cared less about you. Oh yeah, you could have some, but only after I extracted everything I wanted first. You always came second. I don't feel that way anymore. I believe things that I've never believed before. I believe God is a kind and a loving God. I always before thought he was hellfire and damnation and brimstone. Today I believe he's a kind and a loving God, and I believe he stands ready to help any human being anywhere in the world the instant we're ready to give up on self-will and turn back to him. I think he's pure, pure love. I think he's a God of mercy, not a God of justice. Thank God he isn't a God of justice. If he was, I probably wouldn't be here today. And one or two of you might not be here today either. Pure mercy and pure love. I'm convinced of that. I can do things that I never could do before. By golly, I can stay sober. I never could do that before. And because of that sobriety, I'm allowed to do many, 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 many things that I never dreamed that I would be able to do in my lifetime. I think I could probably sit here for an hour and talk about the things that have taken place, the places we've gone, the things we've seen, and the things we've been allowed to do simply because of our sobriety. So surely, 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 Joe and myself and many others have had some kind of spiritual awakening. But it is true that there are no free rides. You really do have to pay for everything you receive. For those of us that have had a spiritual awakening, we are now charged with a certain responsibility. And the book says we tried to carry this message. Not a message, not the message, not some message, this message to other alcoholics. Now, what is this message? Well, it's very, very simple. You know, some of us get to thinking we're healers. Some of us get to thinking we're spiritual advisors and economic advisors. I don't know of anybody that screwed things up any worse than we have. The message that we have to carry, though, is a very simple message. And it goes like this. If you've been out there doing a little drinking, or if you're coming to AA and you're not happy and you're thinking about drinking, we know exactly where you're coming from, because that's where we came from too. And we picked up the big book Alcoholics Anonymous, and we applied the first 11 steps in our lives to the best of our ability. And we've had a spiritual awakening, and we're not that way anymore. And if you don't want to be that way anymore, then you do what we did. You pick up the big book Alcoholics Anonymous, and let us help you as you apply the first 11 steps in your life. And you'll have a spiritual awakening also. And you won't be that way anymore either. And that's the only message that Alcoholics Anonymous has to carry. Period. But let me tell you something. We are the only people in the world really capable of carrying this message. You and I are the experts in the field of alcoholism. We know more about it than anybody alive. We're the only people that's ever experienced it. We know more about recovery from alcoholism than anybody alive. We're the only people that's ever done it. God has given you and I the ability, the knowledge, the skills to avert death in countless thousands and thousands of people, providing we know the message and we know how to carry it. I think we're the luckiest people in the world. As I look back in the history of AA, I'm convinced in my mind that God got tired of seeing people like us die back in the 1930s. I'm absolutely convinced that He used Bill Wilson. He used Dr. Bob. He used Debbie Thatcher. He used Carl Jung. He used Dr. Silkworth. He used the first 100 to put this thing together so that you and I could have it today. Now, all those people are dead. They're all gone. It stands to reason, though, that if He picked people then surely He's still picking people today. If there's not an alcoholic in this room, it ought to be here. I'm going to say it again. Not an alcoholic in this room, it ought to be here. Every one of us ought to be dead. Some of us 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, and 10 times. And we used to say, my, wasn't we lucky last night? I don't think luck had anything to do with it. I think God picked you out. I think He let you suffer your alcoholism so you would know what He wants you to know. I think He saved your life in the meantime. And I think when He got ready to use you, He removed the obsession to drink. So the only question today is, what are we going to do with what has been so freely given to us? Are we going to try to keep it for ourselves? Are we going to selfishly hold on to it? Or are we going to try to share it with other alcoholics? And if we do those things, then God's going to see that we'll have what we need. You know, they tell me today that 97 out of 100 alcoholics are going to die, never even knowing they're alcoholic. 3% of us stumble into AA. And we know that less than 5% of those are recovering from alcoholism. We're talking about one person out of 100. God had to have been the one to pick you out, or you'd be dead just like the rest of them, and I would be too. There's no doubt about this at all. The final thing I have to do is practice these principles, try to practice these principles in all my affairs. What are the principles? Well, a lot of people argue about it. They say the principle of 1 is this, and the principle of 2 is that, and the principle of 3. No, I don't think it has anything to do with it. Bill Wilson did not like to use the same word over and over. He already used the word steps once in step 12, and he didn't want to use it again. So he called them principles instead of steps. And I think what he really said is that I need to try to practice these steps in all my affairs. Now, it's easy for me to practice the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and AA. I love you, and I hope you love me. And we're going to try our best not to hurt each other. But I'm only in AA for an hour or two a day at the most. What do I do the other 22, 23 hours out there? Do I practice these principles in my home with my spouse? Can I realize just how powerless I really am over that lady? Can I realize the insanity of trying to control her knowing full well I can't? Can I make a decision, turn her will and her life over to the care of God as I understand Him? Can I inventory me and find those things within me that cause me to keep trying to control? Can I talk about that to another human being? Can I become willing to have God remove those things, ask Him to take them away? Can I make amends to her quickly when I've harmed her? There's times I'm ashamed of me. There's times I treat absolute strangers on the street with more courtesy than I treat my own wife in my own home. Just think, if I practice these principles there with her and she with me, well, we might pick up 10, 12, 14 hours a day where we could be peaceful and happy and free. If we don't practice them, we don't stand a chance. We're at each other's throat continually. Can I practice them with my children? If I could practice these principles with my children, then what little time I have with them is good times. If I don't practice with them, then I try to control. And they resist, and we have no good times at all. We might pick up another hour or two a day there. How about on the job with my coworkers? Do I practice these principles with the people that I work with? If I do, I might have peace of mind and serenity there 8 hours a day. If I don't, I have no chance. Aren't we really saying that you and I have the tools to be peaceful, happy, and free 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, if we wish to? Make no mistake about it, though. God's not going to do it for you. Other people aren't going to do it for you. But will you, with God's help and the help of other people, can do it for yourself? I think we're the luckiest people in the world. I don't know anybody that has the opportunities for a good, happy life that we alcoholics have. Let's go to page 164, and we're going to close with the last two paragraphs.
Page 164 said, our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and us. Ask Him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with Him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God.
We did that in steps 1, 2, and 3.
Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows.
We did that in 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Clear away the records of your past.
We did that in 8 and 9.
And give freely what you find and join us.
And we'll do that in 10, 11, and 12.
And we shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit. And you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny.
May God bless you and keep you until then. Thank you all for letting us be here. We love you. We love you.